So, Sympathy for the Devil by Kent Anderson is a 1987 war novel about Vietnam, the Vietnam War. It's the most disturbing novel I've ever read to this point in my life. It rivals Blood Meridian. It's very similar, so if you're a fan of Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy or that sort of book, I highly recommend this. It even has very good writing that's very visual, writing that's very like darkly poetic, that elicits all sorts of horrible visuals in your mind to really put you in that sense of the mindset and of the main character in the war, the sense of place. I could talk about this book for hours on end. I don't want to give too much away. Basically, this is just high fidelity to what combat and overall Vietnam experience was actually like for a Green Beret that was a little bit too good at their job. So, yeah, it doesn't have too much of a central preachy like message or a big plot or anything romantic. It's just a series of missions and experiences, and it's told kind of out of order with two tours of duty and then the in-between time where he goes back to the States, and it's kind of like Pulp Fiction style. It's all out of order, but that just somehow makes it more authentically like confusing and chaotic. Every single thing about the Vietnam War was felt like something that shouldn't have happened. The way that Ken Anderson narrates this autobiographical, symbolic main character, which is himself, as Ken Anderson was a Green Beret in Vietnam with severe like PTSD that the war really changed. The way he describes, the way he just describes things, the way he writes, feels as though it's someone whose worldview was warped or turned upside down by being in that state of extreme adrenaline because of the specific type of combat in Vietnam, where a lot of it was, booby traps and ambushes. So maxing out your adrenaline and being hyper aware of things 100% of the time, and using like fear and adrenaline and becoming that sort of mindset, being good at killing and tapping into potential like self-induced, a certain specific type of self-induced sadism in order to cope with what the mind can't cope with. So this book is like a subversion of any sort of moral trope, and essentially, perhaps unintentionally, mocks black and white moral perspectives. And for that reason, it's the most disturbing book I've ever read. It's a bit like, it's almost like witnessing insights into the mortal human condition that no human being was ever supposed to gain, like forbidden knowledge. It's like Kent Anderson feels largely like dead on the inside in a way, has a very just like no nonsense, like part of his spiritual and mental health was permanently like set back, twisted, warped, diminished, and destroyed by the war. And it's not so much a feeling of fear or dread that's in the book, although there is some suspense and just the brutal ugliness and the gore, every single part of war. But it's a mixture of the incomprehensible injustice and nonsense and just complete and utter confusion and pointlessness of the Vietnam War, mixed with this sense of like you're slowly losing motivation or will to try to make sense of anything, like you're losing control of your own fate. Some critics have called this dynamic the corrupting of the reader, of which Anderson is an absolute master of how to explain. You don't see the ending coming. It takes you off guard. It's shocking. This is better than like movie scripts like Apocalypse Now or Platoon, both great films, but this goes to even further dark places. It's basically a sort of a fearless exploration into mankind's potential for savagery. It's something that most people don't want to see, and I can't really in good faith recommend this to anyone that has like a strong sensitivity still, or lots of hope or faith in the human spirit. It's something that I only really sort of read, and I study evil and things like sadism through the lens of fiction objectively from time to time, and occasionally also true crime, in order to get a better grasp of evil in an effort to see what I can do to essentially reduce its influence or purge it from society, generally speaking. Because I myself don't think like a sadist or any sort of thing like that. So, but I find it objectively interesting to read, as you know, hop on the bandwagon. Who doesn't find that stuff interesting? And if you don't, you're a liar. Like, it's the reason why like sensationalized TV shows about serial killers, for example, is so always been so successful and interesting, or lots of movies about psychopaths and people like stuff like that. So people always find wherever there's a lot of heat or substance or meaning in suffering or loss or deranged, like cautionary tales, horror stories, what people find like an example or a cautionary tale of what you shouldn't do. In the same spirit, I think the intent of this book is good because it's trying to expose war. Vietnam is the perfect place to do that because I think Vietnam was, collectively speaking, the U.S. government's biggest historic mistake of all time. One of the worst collectively, one of the most worst human atrocities of all time. There was war crimes in Vietnam. Soldiers were demoralized, that mentally traumatized more than perhaps any other American war, because largely not just because of the specific nature of the enemy, the guerrilla tactics of the Viet Cong, but the ethical, like the whole foundational reason for pursuing the war was nonsensical. And so there's all these sort of coping mechanisms, and I can't even put into words like the corrupting process and this feeling of hopelessness sinking in is present throughout the book, that it just gradually gets worse and worse, but you still are like, it reminds me of the Backrooms movie that I recently saw. It was pretty good. This thing that the creator of that film was fascinated by is human proclivity to pursue the intrigue and the exploration of forbidden knowledge or forbidden states, even when one's like the potential for human curiosity will even bring danger to itself. With a similar spirit, I found this book to be extremely intriguing and insightful, and a really fearlessly honest window into the potential for human evil that immerses you so heavily that you're almost rooting for the character and justifying some of their actions, even when it gets into like the irredeemable, inhuman, savage territory. So the writing alone, if you're a fan of good writing, the writing alone makes it worth a read, even if you don't like war stories. But this has got to be the most intense, depressing, shocking, gripping, and brutally authentic war novel I've ever read, and probably just all of the above, most intense novel I've ever read as well, which says a lot. So for that alone, I have to give it like a 9.5 out of 10, maybe a 10 out of 10. It's not my favorite book ever, but I have to admit it's very powerful. So I strongly recommend Sympathy for the Devil for whoever, by Ken Anderson from 1987, for whoever has the stomach to handle it. And I have to like be mature when I address this. Like, he also wrote a couple sequels that have really good reviews as well. I've got the next book, one of those right here that I'm going to read soon. Night Dogs. This is the direct sequel to Sympathy for the Devil. Anyway, it's a good book.